In this video, 12B-2, we're going to apply the theory of constraints to a particular business. So our learning objectives for this video are to identify any constrained resource in a particular business. If a resource is constrained, then identify the most profitable use of the constrained resource. And finally, compute the value of obtaining more of the constrained resource. In other words, relaxing that constraint. We're going to be working with one of my favorite companies here in town. It's Dorothy and Tony's Gourmet Kettle Corn. This is a local Grand Rapids business that started in 2010. They currently sell product at the downtown market and in specialty food markets. They've had a couple of different production sites. Currently, they are manufacturing their popcorn before the watchful eyes of the customers in the downtown market. They have a number of products that they sell: kettle corn, caramel corn, Chicago-style corn, cheddar cheese, white cheddar cheese, and jalapeno cheddar cheese. For this example, we're going to simplify our discussion of Dorothy and Tony's, and we're going to assume that they only make two kinds of popcorn, caramel corn and kettle corn, both of which I really like. And currently they have only one popper machine with 2,400 minutes per week of available processing time. Now all this information is fabricated for educational purposes, so don't think that this is reality. It's close to reality, but it's purely fabricated. So I've given you basic information about caramel and kettle corn: their selling price, their variable costs, and their contribution margin. Notice that both of the variable costs are about the same, but the caramel corn has a higher selling price than the kettle corn and has a higher contribution margin ratio and contribution margin per bag. Currently, the Dorothy and Tony's can sell 2,000 bags of caramel corn a week and 2,200 bags of kettle corn a week. Now, let's assume that the caramel corn, because it's more coated, requires more popper processing time. And let's assume that it requires 1 minute, whereas the kettle corn requires half a minute. I seriously doubt this is true, but it works for our numbers. This is why we're using it. Is 2,400 minutes of popper time per week enough to meet the demand? Well, let's take the current demand of the two products and multiply it times the popper processing time required per bag. What we see here is that 2,000 minutes are needed for the caramel corn and 1,100 minutes are needed for the kettle corn. So if we add these up, it's 3,100 minutes, but they only had 2,400. So you can see that they have a constrained resource. That's the popper time. They need an extra 700 minutes of time to meet the demand. So the business has identified popper time as a constrained or scarce resource. Now the question becomes, in the short run, how can the business maximize profits? Well, the theory tells us that we are going to produce items with the highest contribution margin per scarce resource. So the steps to compute this are: first, compute the contribution margin per unit. Second, how much constrained resource is required to produce 1 unit? If we take steps 1 and divide by steps 2, we get the contribution margin per unit of scarce resource. From this, we can identify the ranking of the product profitability and thus figure out how to strategy of producing our product. So the numbers that we have here, we're told that the contribution margin for caramel corn is $2.40, for kettle corn is $1.50, that the caramel corn requires a minute and the kettle corn half a minute. So we see that the contribution margin per unit of constrained resource is $2.40 for caramel corn and $3 for the kettle corn. because the kettle corn they can produce in 1 minute of time, they can produce and sell 2 bags. So what we see here then is that the highest priority is our kettle corn, and the second or the lower priority is the caramel corn. Now if we had more than 2 products, we could rank them in order, descending order. So what would be the planned production? Okay, there's 2,400 minutes available. Caramel corn was the first product that we were going to produce. There's demand of 2,200 units. So if I multiply this times the half a minute required, it uses up 1,100 minutes of our 2,400 minutes. So that means there's 1,300 minutes left to produce kettle corn. How much can we produce? Well, if we take the 1,300 minutes and divide it by the 1 minute per unit, the production is 1,300 units. So take and multiply that, we see that it totals 1,300 minutes again, and we're out of minutes. So this brings us to our quiz question. What would the optimal production for caramel and kettle corn be in the short run, given the 2,000 popper minutes per week? Well, we had just computed this to be 1,300 bags of the 2,000 demanded of caramel corn, and the full 2,200 bags of the 2,200 demanded of the kettle corn. Now, moving ahead to think about relaxing this constraint, maybe in the long run, how much would Dorothy and Tony be willing to pay for additional popper time? Well, we're going to look at what is the lost sales in terms of units, and this is going to help us to compute the lost contribution margin, which we know that because fixed costs are not changing is also the lost profit. And then we can identify the extra hours needed, and this will help us to figure out how much they would be willing to pay for additional popper time. So we've already identified the fact that they had demand of 2,000 units of the caramel corn, but we're only able to produce 1,300. So there were 700 bags short of caramel corn. The contribution margin of caramel corn is $2.40. So this is a weekly decline of profit of $1,680. Now they need additional time of 700 minutes, which if you divide this by 60 is 11 hours and 11.67 hours per week. So what we see, we can summarize it in this way. Dorothy and Tony's would be willing to pay up to $1,680 a week for the additional 700 minutes of popper time. So if they could rent that money or rent that time there, that's what they would do. Basically, this is $144 per hour they are losing for not working their popper time. Now, if you were able to work overtime, would you work it for $144 an hour? That certainly would be worthwhile to Dorothy and Tony's to be able to get those extra bags produced and sold. So we see that in the short run, we cut back on the least profitable product, producing the least profitable product. Ultimately, we want to relax that constraint so that we can sell all the units that are demanded and capture all that profit. In closing, I have for you a YouTube video available of Dorothy and Tony's. This is a picture of their downtown market, and you can see the popcorn in the glass displays, and behind the person selling the popcorn is the equipment to produce the popcorn. This is also a video that explains how they make the popcorn, and it actually has a Grand Valley student as an intern describing his experience. So I hope you enjoy this. Our next video in the series is going to be moving into another topic of joint product costs.